Mike, I just want to take a moment to thank you for coming to this moment with us today and being a part of our mission, our intention, our focus. I'm super excited. You and I really got to know each other several months back before all of the changes in our reality and our society and our how we see the world today looks. We were here in a space in California where you're leading a team of account executives, solution technical consultants, and the like. And we just kind of found some common ground. And I'm so thankful that we did at that point, because I think it's what built the opportunity for us to lock arms today on a very important message around what diversity looks like in the tech space and how it shows up, and more specifically, how you show up and what your story is and how you came into this space and what your plans are and your purpose is. So thank you for being here for us and being willing and able and open to your story. That's the inspiring part of this time together. With that, I'll just open it up for you, Mike, and let you share. I'm going to be in a space where I'm going to be working from my laptop and on my phone. So I'll ask, Blair, I'll ask you to sort of man the chat for me a little bit and support me there. And we'll just allow people to come in and join the conversation as they are able. Welcome, Mike. Thank you for being a part of this with us today.
No, thank you guys. Honestly, like I said before, I've been really excited about this opportunity. And in all honesty, like it's kind of created a different perspective for me in looking at, you know, where I work, who I work for, who I work with. And so it's been a fun like experience kind of putting this presentation together before. So, you know, I really appreciate the platform and I appreciate the opportunity. But before we go into the presentation, I just kind of want to, obviously, I want to make a couple comments. You know, we've been talking about it a little bit before, you know, the 9 o'clock time hit, but I just wanted to, you know, I was able to join the call that you guys had last week after George Floyd's murder and hear your experiences. You know, I really appreciated the opportunity to join because hearing you guys open up about your emotions, your reality, your vulnerability, it's incredibly difficult. And I just found the entire conversation and the what's the word? The ambiance of that conversation as a group to be incredibly valuable. I know for me, as I've developed as a leader with Konica Minolta, I've really learned that the hardest conversations are often the ones that can be most productive. Hard conversations often tend to be the most growth-oriented. You gain the most perspective, but it also allows you to self-reflect. And in last week's conversation, since then, I know for me, it's been, I've truly experienced all of that. So basically, I just, you know, I strongly encourage everyone to continue the conversation, continue to tell your story, your truth, your experience, but don't forget to just continue to take care of yourself as well. Those conversations may be hard and uncomfortable at times, but I truly believe it's important for us to have those tense, productive conversations around race, especially with people that do not look like us, don't think like us, and probably don't share many other commonalities beyond that. So I just want to kind of share that because I've been really thinking about this a lot over the last week as I prepared for today. So with that said, we'll head into, yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, as you start to gear up your presentation, I honor you for sharing that, and I really admire how you've been engaged with us for a number of conversations. This isn't the first one. This is probably the fourth one. I have had an opportunity, just while you're pulling up your presentation, to get engaged with a number of our athletes over the week. DeMarlin, a number, Salinas leading a peaceful protest today in Bloomington. But then I've been talking about having an opportunity for our athletes. And I'm just going to put a shout out there to everybody. You'll see an email from us from after today's session with Mike that we have chosen a clip from one of President Obama's State of the Union addresses. He specifically talks about his race. He talks about where we can come together, why it's important, why it matters. And so what we've asked everybody to do is take a video in horizontal view of yourself dictating that talk. It's about like a 40-second talk. We're going to take those videos and we're going to use your voices and your faces to recreate that. And we're going to honor him. We're going to share that it's from him. But we're going to use that as a message that goes out. And then we're going to link that to what we're talking about today, how leadership shows up from a diverse lens. So we're going to wrap those things together and stand together from the intention of solidarity. So I just wanted to let everybody know, if you have questions, let me know. You can reach me, reach others. But there will be a follow-up to this conversation, and there will be links and ways to take action so that we can represent what Mike's sharing from speaking about the conversation, but doing it in a very positive and focused way. So thank you, Mike. We're excited about what you have to share with us today and how it weaves in to that bigger conversation about intention and solidarity.
Sure. Blair is gonna take over the screen. Thank you. All right, take it you can all see my screen right now. All right, sounds good. All right, so
Awesome.
yeah, obviously the focus of today's conversation is around diversity and leadership. Obviously I work for Konica Minolta, and I'll kind of go through what our agenda is today. So the plan today that I want to first start with is I'm going to start our conversation today kind of like I start my interviews, which is a little unorthodox, I think, for a lot of people, but I always go into my personal background and career path. I think it opens up just an understanding of who I am and how I've come to be where I'm at today, and why I've become the person that I am today, and what's molded my mentality. Then we'll dive into a little bit more of like who's Konica Minolta, what we do, give you a little bit of the story of how we've transformed over the last several years. And then we'll dive into, some of the more detailed topics of, diversity and inclusion, and then leadership as well. So with that said, this is an embarrassing slide, but also really fun for me. So my background, I grew up in Eastern Washington, in the middle of nowhere. Not many people probably know much about it. Usually people, when they think of Washington State, it's like, oh, you live in Seattle. Well, it's a pretty big state, so there's a lot of space out there. But, as I said before, I was speaking to some of the other people before the call started, but, where I grew up, it's pretty rural, pretty in the middle of nowhere. But there's a lot of agricultural work, and that's what led my, being of Mexican descent, that's what led my family out there is the agricultural work that's in Eastern Washington. And, you name it, they picked it. And, I appreciate what, my mom always tells me about the stories about how tough that work is, and how fortunate I am to have never had to do it. So, we grew up in Kennewick, Washington. As you can see, if you look at the middle picture, that's just me and my family. That's my great grandma, who was a big influence, and passed away at a very young age. But my mom was a single mom who had to raise 3 kids. Her first husband passed away, and me being the youngest, I was born. But but my dad wasn't in the picture from a very young age. Before I should say before I was even born. So, you know, a lot of what molded me growing up was, you know, that adversity of just having a single mom who wasn't very well educated. She was 17 when she dropped out of school, in an area where, you know, poverty was common for Mexicans. So that was kind of just a huge element of who I've become, and why I think I have a unique perspective on life, career goals, and also what led me down the path of what started out at 4 years old, which was wrestling. You know, I was very fortunate that my uncle approached my mom to say, hey, you need to get the boys into wrestling because they could be really good at it or something. So my brother was 7 years older than me. He was a phenomenal athlete. And so my mom was like, go ahead, Dave can do it anytime. But me being 4 years old and 30 pounds, which is just tiny, for those of you guys don't understand, like what kids sizes are. My daughter is 2 years old. She's about 25 pounds and she's tiny for a 2-year-old. So I wasn't much bigger than her. But eventually my uncle convinced her to let me do it. And I didn't look back. I was like a fish in water, and it just happened to be an awesome community, a great sport to just learn so much about life and what it takes to be successful. And so, you know, over the course of the years, I slowly
Hey everybody, it appears that Mike might have had some connections issues and dropped off. I'll let him back in as soon as he reconnects.
No.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Sorry about that. Can you guys still
All
see me?
good. It happened.
Okay. All right. So back to you know, my wrestling. So from middle school is when I kind of started to take off, and what was great about the sport is it kept me focused. I understood what was important. School, sticking around good friends, and again, just I think one of the challenging things that a lot of people don't have is it's hard to find support, and I was able to kind of gravitate towards mentors, and whether they were good mentors or bad mentors, I don't know. Honestly, I remember some of my coaches smoking weed in the parking lot at tournaments, but you know, they were there for me. So to each their own, and the fact that they were just great leaders, and for somebody that didn't have a father, you know, it didn't matter who the father figures were in my life or what they did. It's just that they showed up and they cared. So as I'm like progressing in wrestling, so this conversation might be a little bit hard for me to kind of get through for a second, but bear with me. When I was 8 years old, my brother was 15, and over the last couple of years, at that time, my brother had, been in and out of the house, eventually led to him moving out of the house and just living basically on the streets as he got involved in gang activity. And so that was hard because I lost one of my big support systems, and at 8 years old, you don't really know why your brother's leaving. But fast forward to my brother's 15. Next thing we know, he's basically in jail getting tried for murder. Sorry. Excuse me. So at 8 years old, it was I didn't understand. I didn't understand what was going on, didn't understand the impact. Okay. So at that point, there was a lot going on in our area around gangs, and we didn't have the finances to provide my brother with like the kind of legal representation he needed. And because of the circumstances around the Mexican gangs at the time, there was I just remember my brother telling me, one of the cops said to him that, it doesn't matter if we got the right guy. We got one less gang member off of the streets. So as you can see, like, this just had a profound impact on me, and makes me understand, like, the world is not perfect at all right now. It wasn't then, it isn't now. But I always try and take things like this, the adversity, the challenges that we face, and how do you make it part of who you are and positively project it out into the world. So with that said, having wrestling at that time gave me an avenue to just really focus. And as I said, this is when I really started to progress, excel, compete at a much higher level. And with that, so I should go back. At the time, my brother ended up getting sentenced to prison for 12 to 15 years, 10 on good time. 15-year-old kid. He was tried as an adult. So really did not go well for us. But again, at the end of the day, you take a positive, and I'll talk about my brother here in a minute, a little bit more about where he's at today. But going back to high school, that's when I just took off and had a great amount of success in high school with wrestling. Got good grades. I think I graduated with a 3.8 GPA. And growing up, the funny thing is, first of all, for the longest time, I didn't even think about college. I didn't think that was an option. And then, I figured by the time I graduate, my options would be limited. But with the body of work that I put together, both academically and wrestling, having won 2 state championships, having been a runner-up, unfortunately, my senior year, I ended up getting a concussion, had an injury to fault out, but I did enough by that point to where I was getting recruited not just by local schools in Washington or D3 schools, but I'd been on the radar of the likes of like Columbia, Harvard, Cornell. So I took that positively and was able to kind of just develop and take what was a negative into a growth. So with that said, as you can imagine, I was really close to my family, which, you know, made the college decision a really tough decision. I had a lot of offers from schools that were really close to home, but at the end of the day, knowing what I'd be missing out if I didn't take advantage of going to an Ivy League school, I knew I had to do it. And Cornell was the best option when it came to the combination of athletics and academics. So then that presented a challenge in itself. I was moving across the country to a place that I didn't know about, to a school that was typical student, didn't look like me, didn't come from a background like mine. And so the first few years were really tough because I was homesick, missed my family. I didn't really have much guidance, didn't have much. My mom didn't know how to apply to schools. My mom didn't know how to say, hey, here's how you navigate this or how you navigate that. Hey, once you get to school, this is what you should do. This is where it, and so not having all of that just kind of, you know, delayed a lot of my ability to kind of get to the next step in a lot of ways. Fortunately for me, you know, being on the wrestling team, I had a great group of friends, great support system to just kind of keep me going. But so academically, I had to evolve and adapt. But on the other part too, being in high school and being like basically the best wrestler in any room you walk into and having that confidence, then going on to a team where I'm like maybe 15th best on a good day. I was really knocked on my ass and just kind of put into a new, like totally new perspective as far as understanding like how much harder I just had to work and adapt. So with that said, you know, the first few years just did not go as planned, and I did not expect to, you know, I expected to be a starter, I expected to be national champion, all that stuff. But what I was able to do was adapt to my place on the team. I worked hard. I supported my team members as best I can by just, you know, showing up and being one of the harder working teammates, to the point where I ended up still being an incredibly valuable role on the team as a backup. I backed up some guys that ended up being national champions, All-Americans. And I was proud of that after a while. I in the moment, I didn't realize it, but I was proud of it later. Because I stepped up in places that most people wouldn't. Not sure if anyone's familiar with wrestling, but cutting weight is a big part of it. And there were times where I stepped up where no one else would. So I look back at my first 3 years of college as such a huge learning experience, and such a period of growth for me. Finally, my senior year, got an opportunity where I stepped up and was able to start. You know, made it to the NCAA tournament, almost placed, but as I always tell people, almost only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. So didn't mean much, but still proud of my senior year. After that, I continued to wrestle. I wanted to compete, like since I was a kid, as you can imagine, I wanted to wrestle in the Olympics, and trained in Ithaca for a while. Fortunately, that didn't pan out, and I wasn't seeing the success that I wanted. So I came to a crossroads of, do I move to a place where I want to go and train hard, or like find a better training circumstance, or do I think it's time to hang up the boots and move on and start looking at a professional career? So made the tough choice, moved out to San Francisco with my girlfriend at the time, and began looking for careers. And for me, I was like, oh, I could do sales. You know, I'm pretty charismatic. I can have a good conversation and talk to people. And clearly I had all the wrong ideas of what sales was, but you know, that's a whole learning path in itself. So found the opportunity at Konica Minolta. As you can see down in the left corner, I've developed a great family here, to the point where they're just throwing a ton of Post-it notes on my office at times. So that was a fun day. But, since I've been at Konica Minolta in 2011, the first 2 years were actually fairly tough for me as well. Went through additional personal adversity while I was having limited success in sales. I was, sales is a quota driven business, and, I was roughly 65, 70%, fairly average, I would say. And it didn't help that, like, in the first 6 months of me, or I should say 3 to 4 months of working at Konica, I was in debt coming into San Francisco. San Francisco was expensive, and ran into just a plethora of challenges. Got a cat with my girlfriend where we weren't supposed to have pets, and ended up having to get evicted. She ended up getting accepted to NYU across the country because she was doing so well in law school. But I wanted to see where my career was going, so I stayed out here. She went to NYU. Add a close death in the family. At the time, Konica Minolta didn't offer health insurance until 90 days later. Happened to get an appendectomy at the time, which without insurance is expensive as hell. So highly suggest avoiding that. So all these kind of rolled up into a matter of 6 months. I was just kind of set back on my ass again, but with the right support, through conversation, really picked up my mentality, came out of it with the right mindset. And, after those first few years of struggling with Konica, I found my path and what worked for me. And eventually that led to, president's clubs and hitting my quotas, and, seeing a high level of success within the company as a salesperson. So first 7 years I've been with Konica in a sales position, gradually progressing through the different executive levels that we have, eventually leading to an opportunity 2 years ago when, our management position in San Francisco opened up. And that's where, and my mindset was always that, I wanted to coach, I wanted to teach, I wanted to educate, which is why I wanted to go into the management track. Not everyone goes down that route. And, we all have different strengths and weaknesses, but mine I felt was in the leadership role. But at the time, again, kind of having the wrong idea, I pictured it's management, not realizing how important leadership it truly is. So over the last 2 years, I've been growing, developing as a leader, and really just trying to, working towards a vision of where my future leadership will end up. On a personal level, you'll see that me and my family down here at the bottom, my partner Jen and I have been together for 7 years, and we have a 2-year-old daughter who is amazing and exhausting all in the same breath. So
hey, Mike.
Yeah.
Mike, I think we're missing your slide. I know I saw it a minute ago, but I think when you disconnected, can you reshare that for us?
Sure.
Because I'd love to see your daughter's face again. I was trying to look at him earlier. I loved it. Here we go.
There
Perfect.
we go.
Thank you. Love it.
Okay. Sorry about that. So yeah, you can see my daughter there in the middle. She's tiny, like I said. But so really long story that went longer than I planned. So I do apologize. But long story short, everyone's path is different. And for me, I've learned that I need to own what my life has been through, whether it's challenging, less challenging, it doesn't matter. Everyone's path is different. Everyone's perspective is different. And it's these instances that really mold you into the person that you become. But utilize that as a strength, and utilize that as a way to move forward, learn from it, grow from it. And like I said, I'll touch real quickly. You know, my brother, having said that, you know, it was, oh my God, 26 years ago that my brother went to prison at 15 years old. 10 days goes by, he gets out on good time. And, you know, fortunately for him, he found a wonderful woman that really helped him transition out of prison life. Because if anyone's familiar with the prison system or jail time, it tends to be cyclical. And if you don't have a catalyst to take you a different direction, it's hard to get out of that. So, you know, my brother is very fortunate. He now has a family with 3 kids, 2 grandkids, and they're doing very well in my hometown. So, all right. So I'll pause for a moment. I mean, any quick questions? I mean, I this is kind of taken away from some of the stuff that I think we wanted to go into deeper, but we can move through some of the CAM stuff pretty quickly. So any questions? Okay.
Mike, I just want to say that I appreciate how you've taken the time to allow us to get to know who you are as a person. And you've been so incredibly vulnerable with your story. I just want to honor you for that right now. And, you know, what we do with our lives has so much to do with how we started our lives. So thank you for that. And I'm looking forward to the follow-ups from our athletes here on where they could see themselves modeling after some of your decisions and how you've thought through your choices in life. For sure.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, and this is, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No,
This is
no,
Shauna.
no, please.
I asked you a question. Yeah, I think, so this is Shauna. I'm a part of the leadership team here on athLEDA. And again, I echo the amazing story and your ability to be vulnerable and share that with us. I'm curious, we talk a lot about transitioning and how, you know, when you made transitions like you did in your life, and you are dealing with such like loud challenges. And I do this because these are like these waves of it, like tsunamis that hit us in time. And, you know, when you are adjusting to like a job search and corporate life and things like that, are there some things that you can share with that you maybe like that you really clung to from your athletic background, or you feel like they really pulled you through? Are there any like things that you would tell yourself or think back to remind yourself that like you had that inner strength and that power to make it through? Does that make sense? My question? Uh-oh.
Looks like we may have lost
Oh,
Mike again temporarily.
Shauna, while he's jumping on, I wanted to just say that is spot on. It makes it so much more challenging when you don't come at life from a space of privilege, and you do have to work hard and figure things out from a lot of different difficulties early. It does make us show up different for sure. Mike, are you back with us?
I don't see him yet, Jelena.
Well, don't you love technology? This is exactly why we are all focused on it. So let me text Mike. Give me just a second, everybody. Hang tight there for just a second.
Hey, for everybody that's on, I know some folks joined us after Jelena mentioned the project that we're going to be putting together. Again, thanks to DeMarlin for heading it up. I've attached a PDF in the chat, but we'll also mail it out afterwards that just kind of goes over some instructions and some expectations. If you can't get to the PDF that's in the chat, we'll be following up after the session here with a little bit of an email to everybody. Looks like Mike's getting back on now.
And while he's getting back on, thank you again, athLEDA, for this opportunity to be able to work with you all. It's truly an honor, so thanks.
Well, we appreciate you taking the initiative to do that and help us out, DeMarlon, for sure. It's going to be very impactful. I'm anxious to get working on it. Jalen, you may not know, but I'm going to ask for your help putting that video together as part of our training, and probably get Julie involved as well.
All right, sounds good.
Hey everyone, sorry about that. I'm not sure what's going on with my internet today.
Hey, it happens. Mike, Shauna, do you mind throwing that question back at Mike so he can hear it again?
Sure. Mike, I just wanted to ask you, first of all, I was just, again, acknowledging, your incredible ability to share your story with us and trust the safe space of this call. So thank you for that. And a lot of what we talk about with this group is the transitions that we face and how we often find ourselves calling upon our previous background as athletes, like as a source of strength to help us kind of, as I talk about it, like instead of riding the highs and lows and the freaking out, it's like that sense of calm and knowing, like, again, pulling from your ability as an athlete to help you through transitions. And then, to excel, and especially in a place like, a big place like you are now and in a sales role. So I'm curious if you can share with people whether it was a conscious calling on your previous background, whether you just found yourself instinctually, so we can help people on this call think about, as they're moving forward, really calling upon that they already have, as a part of their identity and a part of their traits and characteristics.
Yeah.
Does that is that helpful? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a great question, honestly. I think, it's funny that you asked that, because a lot of my conversation as I was developing this presentation was, what would I want to educate other people on to, like, keep in mind and focus on as they go through, their experiences. I think one of the challenging things that I had was I didn't really have much guidance, or I was always there for me, but she didn't have the most articulate ways on saying, hey, don't forget about this, or, you have this, you can do this because of this, right? So with that said, for me, I think personally, it was somewhat instinctual that I had the ability to adapt, through my own experience. I had already handled enough adversity, and knowing that, hey, I've already been through harder times, I can handle this, was helpful. And I think that the thing about athletes is that when you start to see a level of success and you understand the importance of hard work, you realize that you have these characteristics and traits that are instilled in you or instinctual. Some of it's instilled, some of it's instinctual. So understanding that it takes time to adapt. In the moment, it might be tough, but knowing that you have the ability to just stay resilient and get through the challenges now, because tomorrow you're going to get right back up and get back on that horse. So I think really, like, athletes as a whole have a unique way of developing a level of resilience through sport. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, sorry, I was on mute, so I wasn't in that background noise. Yeah, that's perfect. And I think hopefully that gives everybody a little bit of a nugget for how to really take some of the things that can be really relevant to your life and how you path forward. And also just how do you get through trials and tribulations, whether it's everything that we're facing right now in this world, or it's thinking about, like, during everything that's going on, like trying to figure out what your path forward is. I think I know he just dropped off here, but I was actually, Jalen and I were talking earlier today, and a lot of what he talked about right then was stuff that she and I talked about. And I'll tell you, I've shared my own story with you guys, and I think most people on this call have heard it. But, you know, in my state right now, as I'm trying to define my path forward and figure out like my job situation, and, you know, while I'm also a part of this and hopefully building it, you know, bigger and stronger together, you know, I think that these are things that I find myself calling upon, and I'm much older than most of you on this call. You know, so again, these are lifetime traits and characteristics that you develop. And I mean, like I said, I call on them all the time. So thank you, Mike, so much for sharing that. I think it helped it be really relevant to everybody on this call.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. It's a great question. Hey, share screen again. Can you hear me, Blair? Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't hear what you said. You were kind of breaking up.
Oh, can you allow me to share the screen again?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I apologize for the internet connection. It's usually not an issue until 2 o'clock when everyone starts using it again.
You should be all set.
Okay, thank you. Can everyone see my screen now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so I'm gonna kind of roll through the KM stuff real quickly. But what I want to kind of build is just like the story of how Konica Minolta has evolved and transformed over the last several years. You know, we're a global company. We have offices all around the world. We have offices all around the U.S. and are a huge corporation with a lot of local presence. These are more boring numbers, so I won't go into that. I'll pause here for a minute. As you know, as we go into diversity and inclusion, you know, some of the key things that you'll see is like you can hear the message from our philosophy, from our values that tie to what diversity promotes and what it actually, what the positive impact it can have. So we'll touch more on innovation. As you can see in our values, we look at inclusive and collaborative. You know, a lot of people I don't know that everyone understands the difference between what diversity and inclusion mean. So we'll touch on that a little bit. So Konica Minolta, we're a tech company. I mean, we've evolved over the last several years. So the goal of our company is really to bring a futuristic workplace. You know, with COVID-19 hitting right now, we are in a pretty unique space, and has completely forced many companies to adapt quickly, having to work as if they are in the future, and no longer putting a pause on, you know, company progression from a technology perspective. So I always like to talk about how, you know, Konica Minolta, we were a copier company, and you know, it's, for me, that's not the flash. That's not exciting. It's still a hardware that's required in most businesses. But as you can imagine, you know, in the COVID era, you know, a lot of people aren't in their offices. They're not printing. They're not utilizing these tools anymore. So how do you evolve? How do you grow? And the progression that Konica Minolta has taken has allowed us to adapt and pivot really seamlessly and put us in a position to continue to see success. So the first step of that was really taking a big plunge in terms of acquiring a large IT company, all covered as our IT division. And that was a really futuristic vision of the leaders of our company to say, hey, the office is changing, printing's going down. We need to change our approach and what we have to offer. So with that said, they wanted to own the network by acquiring this company. Since the initial acquisition of all covered, I'm getting some background noise from somebody. There we go. Cool. So with that said, you know, since the initial acquisition of $55 million of all covered, we've acquired 55 to 60 other IT companies around the country, expanding our footprint, expanding our expertise, and giving more value to our customers. The next element of that is information. It's not the documents that are important, it's the information within those documents. And so another element of Konica Minolta's vision was, how do we develop and manage the information? How do we own that information? How do we make it more productive and seamless to access? And so simultaneous with the acquisition of all these IT companies, they've invested in and strategically partnered with different companies that are, best to breed within their space. And so ultimately, over time, how Konica Minolta has evolved and transformed is developing a portfolio that eventually becomes much more valuable to the customer. So, but that's not the important piece. Konica Minolta, we're great. I think we have an awesome portfolio. We have a lot to offer. But what's more important? The customer. And so in sales, I think a lot of people have a stereotype of who a salesperson is, and it's like, oh, the guy that can persuade anyone to do this. But realistically, it's the people that put themselves in the shoes of their clients, and what their challenges are, what their initiatives are. And so when you go back to everything that we did, it was for the customer. How do we be more valuable to the customer and give a more quality experience with Konica Minolta? And so these are some of the things that you'll see that we focus on when it comes to the customer, and how we can impact initiatives around these topics. So bringing it full circle, we built up a portfolio that expands and opens up the ability to touch more customers in different places that they never thought they could with Konica Minolta. But it doesn't stop there. So when it comes to Konica, the vision is, how can we help customers address the issues of tomorrow, not just of today? Obviously, like I said before, COVID has just fast-tracked that really quickly. And so we've developed a portfolio, and we strategically partner as well in technologies that are more futuristic and potentially have the ability to address issues further down the road. With that said, one of the differentiators in Konica Minolta is that our research and development it far exceeds anyone in our quote unquote industry. And I do that because a lot of our copier competitors aren't able to do everything that we can, and to the level that we can do it. So what Konica Minolta has been doing is they're creating their own innovation, their own technologies. So this is a great example of a technology that we've developed internally. It's proprietary to us, but we strategically partnered with, the likes of Microsoft or HP enterprises, which are conglomerates in their own space, right? But it's developed a simple infrastructure network for people in the small to medium-sized base space to address the issues that they have with a little more affordability. Obviously, so there's always key topics that, every large company has to focus on. And so we have a pretty well thought out plan as far as maintaining sustainability. So you can imagine, the production of equipment and, from start to finish, the logistics of all that, there's a lot of impact from a sustainable perspective, but they have a high level of focus in different avenues to make sure that we're doing our part. Briefly on this slide, not to humble brag, but one of the key things about Konica Minolta's success is the importance of the customer, right? So what I'll brag about on this page is, the customer loyalty. In our space, we've won it 13 years straight. And it's because of our focus and dedication to the customer, as opposed to focus on our numbers, our revenues, and things like that. So you don't win these kinds of names just being a basic company. So, I just want to kind of exemplify that, we can really help anyone out there, no matter how big or small. Now, to close on the conic Minolta stuff, this is one of the most important parts. So I've talked about conic Minolta and what we do, but again, as I said before, the most important element is the customer. So this is what we call our 6-step process. And what the 6-step process does, it allows us to open up and understand the customer, understand what they want, what they need, what challenges they're facing, where do they want to go. And until you understand that, you can't really sell them anything, because you don't know if it's going to fix a problem. You don't know if it's going to be of impact. So we utilize process in order to understand and find ways to, eventually get our own revenue. So I know I've been through that really fast with, KM stuff, but any questions on that?
Hi, I don't have a question with regards to the company per se. My question kind of has to do with how you got to your professional experience, kind of reflecting back on Ms. Shauna's question as well. Hello, my name is Damarlon Sisti, but please feel free to call me D. First of all, I loved your story on how personable you were and everything. I mean, I kind of did a self-reflection as well on how you can kind of get it out the mud, quote unquote, from birth, to get you to where you are now. I mean, I come from a household that fell woefully below the poverty line, and to now end up as an enterprise sales intern for AWS is just like amazing. So my question reflects on coping. What were some of your things? We talked about this kind of this adaptability and everything like that, but in that you have this coping and these mechanisms of coping that you have to deal with. So in doing that, was it your mentors? Was it somebody that you were talking to kind of lead you to where you are within your professional experience?
Another great question. I think coping is really tough for a lot of people, and finding ways to cope. I think over time, it took me different ways to understand that what I was doing was actually, in a sense, a method. I think one of the things is, I think you can all tell that I'm open to vulnerability. And I think that was a strength of mine, right? Because I was able to open up with, whether it was a mentor, whether it was family, whether it was friends, I've never shied away about showing my emotion and letting it come out when it just needs to come out. And through that, I've had very in-depth, this is kind of embarrassing to say, but I've cried in front of pretty much every one of my bosses. And that's okay. Because I've had some really tough conversations with them at different times in my career. But opening up and being able to be vulnerable and just letting things out has allowed me to kind of stop for a moment and realize, the world is not going to end right now. And then you take that coping mechanism, but then you turn it in, okay, how do I make this a positive? What can I learn from this experience? And how can I make it so where, maybe I handle this situation differently, or how do I continue to grow from my own experience nonetheless? And, I know we're running low on time, but, part of my discussion around leadership was really to kind of focus on, control what you can control, right? There's so much out there going on and so many elements that are completely out of our control. And when you kind of let go of that and not try and take ownership of all of it, there's this kind of weight off your shoulders. And so when it came to that realization, it's like, okay, I can do X, Y, and Z, which completely controls my fate in these areas, but it could potentially also influence outside variables. And so taking that, and then the last part of it is just having a positive mentality, right? It's like, I know I will get through this, and tomorrow will be a brighter day.
Mike, this is so great. I swear I'm over here like smiling and shaking my head because I literally, so much of what you just said is what I was talking to Jalen about this morning. And again, I think that's like the mind and heart of an athlete. And I just absolutely, applaud what you've shared with us today overall. I think that was an amazing response, that you provided. And, I think being so authentic, it's like just being real. I think it goes such a long way. And I think that's a lot of what you're talking about. How you approach the world, how you approach work, and even like overcoming some stereotypes about like, it's not okay to show emotion. It's not okay to be raw and real and authentic. So thank you for bringing that to us and sharing this. And again, helping it be so relatable. I think one thing that's so critical is as we're having these talks is for our speakers to share, tell their story, but also give key nuggets that like our talent can go, I want to take that away and learn. And I talk about them as key takeaways that we can then implement in our life and model ourselves after people who are successful. So thank you so much for that. And I guess in closing, since we only have a couple minutes left, I think that, is there a way that if people want to get in touch with you, are you able to share either, LinkedIn, email, that kind of thing? Is that something that you're open to and able to share with people in case they want to continue to stay in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm more than happy. Connect with me on LinkedIn. It's
Okay.
Mike Salinas. Pretty easy to find. And, yeah, I love LinkedIn. And then if, we communicate via LinkedIn and I'm happy to give my email if we,
Amazing.
we want to have further conversations and things like that.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for joining today. Jelana had to drop because her connection wasn't there. Thank you for holding this space and being here for each other and our speaker today. Have a great weekend. I will be off next week, so you won't see me or hear me on next week's call, but I'll be back the next one to contribute. Okay. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.